My parents arranged a surprise birthday celebration with all my relatives, but when I unwrapped their present that I had desperately wanted, everyone in the house went silent and pale. Be me. 33-year-old Thomas Wilson. Turned 33 this year. Birthday has always been a low-key thing. Homemade cake. Maybe a dinner out. That was it. Family suddenly decides to throw me a surprise party. Would have been touched if my sister Olivia hadn't accidentally let it slip a week before. She called asking about something random. Suddenly blurted out, "Oh, by the way, do you have a suit ready for Saturday?" Pause. Why would I need a suit? Silence. Awkward stammering. Then she sighs. Okay, just pretend I didn't say that. Played it cool. Wasn't a big deal. Actually gave me time to prepare. What I wasn't prepared for was how over the top this party was. Walked into the venue. A rented banquet hall. Not even someone's house. Balloons and streamers everywhere. Buffet table that looked like it belonged at a wedding. Professionally made 3-tier cake sitting in the center. Waiters carrying trays of fancy appetizers. Extravagant. Way beyond anything my family had ever done for me before. The setup wasn't the only thing that felt off. Guest list was strange. People I barely knew. Distant relatives. My parents' friends. Even my dad's old business associate. Quickly noticed none of my friends were there. Had given my mom a list of people to invite. Where were they? Before I could ask, event took a weird tone. Instead of a warm birthday gathering, felt more like some kind of business networking event. Every time I turned around, someone pulling me aside for a chat. First one came from my cousin David. Handed me a sleek, expensive-looking watch. Before I could even say thanks, he clapped a hand on my shoulder, grinned. This means you're my best man, right? Wouldn't feel right without you. Blinked in surprise. Oh, good. It's settled then, he said, before I even agreed. Then came my Uncle Robert. Handed me an envelope, smiling like he'd done me a huge favor. Just a little something, he said. Then with a lowered voice, my son just graduated and is looking for work. You've got a good job at that marketing firm. Maybe you could pull some strings? Hadn't even opened the envelope yet. Already felt like I owed him something. It kept happening. A gym membership from Aunt Patricia, with a comment about how it would do me some good. A distant relative giving me an expensive leather wallet, then casually mentioning how they might need help moving next weekend. Then came the biggest gift. My parents' contribution. Dad made a big show of it, gathering everyone around, announcing, "We've put down a deposit for a house for you." Room broke into applause. Stood there trying to process it. A house. That was huge. Then my mother smiled. Added, "It's just a few blocks from us, so we'll be able to stop by whenever. And of course, we'll have a spare key just in case." Something in my stomach twisted. They hadn't asked if I wanted to live near them. They had just assumed. Glanced at my sister. Before I could even say a word, she handed me a car key. And this, she said, means you can drive Mom to her appointments now. Let out a short laugh, hoping it was a joke. It wasn't. Every single gift had a condition attached. Tried to make a joke out of it. Are there any gifts that don't come with obligations? I asked. Forcing a smile, Mom waved a hand dismissively. Family always helps family. That's how it works. Final straw was when a family friend approached, handing me another envelope. I know you've been doing well for yourself, he said. So I figured you'd want to make a generous donation to our charity. Hadn't even asked. Just assumed I would do it. Stood there looking at the pile of gifts. That felt more like chains. Realized I was being cornered. This wasn't a birthday celebration. This was a setup. Morning after the party, I stopped by my parents' house to talk. Had spent the night replaying everything in my head. The guest list. The gifts with conditions. The fact that my own friends weren't even invited. It didn't sit right with me. Wasn't angry, just unsettled. Started by thanking them for organizing everything, making sure they knew I appreciated the effort. Then brought up the expectations attached to the gifts. Explained that while I was grateful, couldn't accept things that came with obligations I hadn't agreed to. The moment I finished speaking, they laughed. Like I had just told a joke. That's just how family works, my mother said, waving it off like it was nothing. My father, Harold, nodded in agreement. Everyone helps each other. You act like you're being forced into something. Reminded them about the house. I hadn't even seen it. They had picked the location, signed the paperwork. decided they would have a spare key, without ever asking if I was okay with it. My father scoffed, told me I was making a big deal out of nothing. My mother folded her arms, looked hurt, saying they had done something huge for me, and I was just throwing it in their faces before I could get another word in. My phone buzzed. David didn't pick up. A minute later, another call came through, then a message, then another. By the time I left my parents' house, he had sent at least 5 messages in a row. Finally opened them when I got to my car. They weren't friendly. He wasn't just asking if I was going to be his best man anymore. He was demanding it. Said he had already told people I agreed. Backing out now would make him look bad. When I didn't respond right away, another message came through. If you didn't want the responsibility, you shouldn't have taken the watch. By the time I got home, Uncle Robert had joined in. The one who handed me the envelope at the party. He called, acting like we had already agreed on something. Wanted to know when I could set up an interview for his son. Kept saying it was just a favor. That it wouldn't take much effort on my end. When I hesitated, his tone shifted, reminded me that he had given me a generous gift, implied that he had done something for me, so now it was my turn to return the favor. While all of this was happening, I finally got around to talking to my friends. Hadn't even had a chance to tell them about the party yet. When I did, they were furious. Not just about the way the party turned out, but the fact that my parents had never sent them invitations. One of them even pulled up an old text from weeks ago, where I had mentioned looking forward to seeing everyone at my birthday. They had assumed my plans had changed, had no idea I had been expecting them. It was one thing for my family to throw me a party with a weird guest list, but deliberately leaving out my own friends. That was something else entirely. My phone didn't stop buzzing all day. Word had spread fast among the family. Messages in the group chat piled up, some in support of me, others calling me selfish. Aunt Patricia, the one who got me the gym membership, chimed in, said I was being overly sensitive. Another relative said I should be grateful people were even giving me gifts. David, still angry about the best man situation, called me spoiled. Then my parents weighed in, sent a long message saying I had embarrassed them, hurt people who were only trying to help me. They said I was acting like a child, rejecting the family's generosity just because I didn't like the small conditions attached. They made it sound like I was cutting myself off from the family over nothing. Then silence. They stopped responding to my messages completely. Calls went to voicemail. No more texts. It was a sudden shift, from pushing me to making me feel guilty. I took a few days to process everything. Wasn't sure what to do next. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just about a birthday party anymore. The first thing I did was return the watch. David had been blowing up my phone nonstop, demanding an answer about the best man role. When I met up with him, I handed the watch back, told him I couldn't accept it. At first he looked at me in disbelief, shaking his head. This was a gift, he scoffed, refusing to take it. But when I made it clear I wasn't keeping it, he finally snatched the box out of my hand, muttered something under his breath, stormed off without another word. Within an hour I saw a post on social media about how some people have no sense of gratitude. Next, I went to my parents' house to return the house money. Told them that while I appreciated the gesture, I couldn't accept a home under conditions I had no say in. My mother's face hardened instantly. My father leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. They didn't yell, but the anger was there. My mother asked if I was seriously throwing away a house. Just because I didn't want them to have a key, told them it was about more than that. They had made a life-altering decision for me without even asking. If I wanted it, that was when the guilt trip started. My father accused me of rejecting my family's generosity. My mother sighed dramatically, saying they had only done this because they cared. I stood firm. After several tense minutes, my father finally scoffed and said, "Fine, do what you want." I thought that was the end of it, until Uncle Robert called, the one who had handed me an envelope at the party, expecting a job favor in return. He didn't waste time on pleasantries, wanted to know why I had returned his gift. When I told him I wasn't comfortable with the expectations attached, his voice turned sharp, started ranting about family loyalty, how we should help each other out, how I was acting like a stranger instead of family. Before hanging up, he warned me that I would regret this attitude one day. The backlash didn't stop there. My parents sent another message, saying that if I was going to keep rejecting their support, then I shouldn't expect any future help from them. It didn't bother me the way they probably hoped it would. I had never relied on them financially anyway, but it was clear they were trying to make a point. My friends, who had already been furious about being excluded from the party, weren't surprised by any of this. They told me I should consider distancing myself from my family, that this level of manipulation wasn't normal. I wasn't ready to cut contact, but I couldn't ignore how draining this had all become. Then came the online posts. I noticed some of my relatives, mostly the ones who had been vocal in the family group chat, posting vague messages about ungrateful children and how family sacrifices never seemed to be enough these days. It wasn't subtle. I ignored it, but the messages kept coming, both online and in private. Meanwhile, the car situation got messy, since Olivia had been the one to gift it. I called her directly, told her I wanted to return it. She refused. She had already put the car in my name. She wasn't interested in taking it back. Then she brought up our mother's appointments, saying that she still expected me to drive her. I made it clear that if I kept the car, it would be my decision how I used it. She didn't like that answer, but she didn't push further. Just when I thought the worst had passed, my parents called one more time. This time, their approach was different. Instead of anger, my mother's voice was soft, almost tearful. She asked why I was choosing to be difficult. My father sighed heavily in the background, saying that all they ever wanted was to see me happy. I had heard this before. It was the same guilt-tripping tactic they always used. I didn't engage. After a few minutes, I ended the call. That was the final straw. The messages weren't stopping. I was done arguing. I blocked the worst offenders: Uncle Robert, David, and a few other relatives who had been the most aggressive. While direct messages from them stopped, I soon realized they were using different numbers, and even getting other relatives to pass their messages along. The most surprising shift came from Olivia. At first, she had been on my parents' side, telling me I was overreacting. But after seeing how things had escalated, she admitted she was starting to see my point. She didn't say much, but for the first time, she wasn't just blindly defending them. I wasn't sure what the next step was. But one thing was clear. I was done playing along. If my family only valued me when I did what they wanted, then it was time to start setting my own boundaries. A few days after I blocked my most aggressive relatives, my parents reached out again, this time with a different approach. They wanted a family meeting to clear the air. My mother framed it as a chance to talk things through, to understand each other better. My father called it an opportunity for me to make things right. I already knew what that meant. At first I refused. I had seen how these things played out before: guilt-tripping, manipulation, and everyone talking over me. But then Olivia reached out, telling me she thought I should at least hear them out. She wasn't fully on my side, but she was no longer blindly defending them either. I agreed to go, but only to see how far they were planning to take this. When I arrived at my parents' house, it was clear this wasn't a casual conversation. My mother, father, Uncle Robert, and 2 cousins were already seated, waiting for me, like this was some kind of intervention. Olivia sat off to the side, arms crossed, looking uncomfortable. The moment I sat down, my mother started. She placed a hand over her chest, said she no longer recognized the son she raised. She talked about how I had changed, how I used to be so respectful and grateful, how I was breaking the family apart with my stubbornness. My father chimed in, calling the rejection of the house money a slap in the face. Then the rest joined in. David, the one I returned the watch to, rolled his eyes, said I had embarrassed him by backing out of being his best man. Uncle Robert, who had expected the job favor, leaned forward, warned me that rejecting his help would burn bridges I couldn't rebuild. Another relative muttered about how younger generations had no sense of family anymore. I barely had a chance to speak. Every time I opened my mouth, someone interrupted. The conversation wasn't about hearing my side. It was about pressuring me to back down. Olivia finally spoke up. She pointed out that the party had been more about networking and favors than celebrating my birthday. She said she hadn't realized how bad it was until she saw how many people expected something from me. My father cut her off immediately. He shook his head, said I had brainwashed her, that she was too naive to see how selfish I had become. My mother looked at her like she had personally betrayed the family. Then came the final push. Uncle Robert leaned forward, said that this was my last chance to do the right thing. The job favor was still on the table. But if I walked away now, I shouldn't expect their support in the future. My father nodded, added that if I rejected the family's generosity, I should never come to them for help again. I had held my tongue long enough. I told them that a gift with conditions is not a gift, that I wasn't rejecting generosity. I was rejecting manipulation, that I was done owing people things I never agreed to in the first place. My mother's face crumpled. She started crying, asking why I was abandoning them after everything they had done for me. My father just shook his head, like I was a lost cause. He told me that if I didn't want to be part of the family, then fine. He wouldn't force me, but I shouldn't expect to be welcomed back with open arms. When I realized my mistake, I stood up. There was nothing left to say. The meeting hadn't been about clearing the air. It had been about controlling me. As I walked toward the door, Olivia stood too. For a second I thought she would leave with me, but she hesitated. I gave her a small nod and left without looking back. That was the moment I knew I was done. I wasn't going to fight for a place in a family that only valued me when I followed their rules. The silence started immediately after the failed family meeting. No more calls, no more messages. It was as if I had disappeared overnight. My parents, Uncle Robert, David, the ones who had been so loud about family unity, were suddenly gone. At first it was a relief. No more guilt trips. No more pressure. No more relatives demanding favors disguised as gifts. But then Olivia reached out. She said our parents were leaning on her heavily, telling her it was her responsibility to fix things. They wanted her to talk sense into me, to convince me to come back to the family before it was too late. I told her I wasn't changing my mind. She said she understood, but sounded exhausted. I could tell she was struggling, caught between wanting to support me and feeling obligated to keep the peace. Meanwhile, the guilt campaign kicked into full gear. More vague posts from relatives popped up online. Comments about how family loyalty was a lost value, and how some people forget who raised them. It wasn't subtle. I ignored it. Then my mother crossed a line. She called my office, speaking to the receptionist under the excuse of checking on me. It wasn't normal concern. It was control. I hadn't spoken to her in days. So this wasn't about seeing if I was okay. She wanted to remind me she could still interfere in my life if she wanted to. I had to explain to my boss why my mother was calling the office. It was humiliating. I left instructions with the receptionist not to put through any more calls from her. Then came the last warning from Uncle Robert. He sent me a long message, telling me not to let my pride destroy my family. He talked about how we all needed each other, how I would regret cutting ties one day. He said my parents were heartbroken, that all they wanted was for things to go back to the way they were. I didn't reply. I thought that would be the end of it, until my parents showed up at my apartment. I had no idea they were coming. I was getting ready for the day when there was a loud knock at my door, not the casual kind, but the kind that lets you know the person on the other side isn't leaving anytime soon. I looked through the peephole, felt my stomach drop. My mother and father stood outside. Looking tense, my mother was clutching her purse tightly, my father with his arms crossed. I didn't open the door. Instead, I asked through the door why they were there. My mother immediately said they needed to talk, that this had gone too far. My father said we weren't going to fix this over the phone, so they had to come in. I asked how they found my apartment. The silence on the other side of the door told me everything. Olivia. Later, when I confronted her, she admitted it, looking guilty. They wouldn't stop pressuring me, she said. I thought maybe if they just talked to you, they'd back off. I didn't think they'd ambush you like this. It didn't make it okay, but at least it explained her actions. I kept my voice steady, told them showing up like this was unacceptable. My mother's voice cracked, as she accused me of treating them like strangers. My father said that pushing them away would leave me alone in the world. They weren't listening. I told them one last time that I wasn't letting them in, and that they needed to leave. They refused. My mother's voice grew more desperate. My father knocked again, harder this time. I made the call. When the officers arrived, I opened the door just enough to explain the situation. My parents immediately switched tactics, acting shocked that I would involve the police. My mother clutched her chest like she was about to faint. My father shook his head in disbelief. The officers asked them to leave, and eventually they did. My mother walked away, wiping her eyes. My father gave me a final look before turning to follow her. Not long after, the fallout hit. Relatives were furious. Messages started pouring in, some outraged, some disappointed. A few called me heartless for doing this to my parents. Others just asked what had happened. Then Olivia called. She admitted she had given them my address. She said they had been relentless, breaking her down until she gave in. She hadn't expected them to show up unannounced. She apologized, but the damage was done. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just told her I needed space. That night I changed my locks. I wasn't taking any chances. The silence from my parents didn't last long. After showing up at my apartment and being turned away, they switched tactics. If they couldn't get to me directly, they would go through other channels. It started at work. My boss called me into his office, looking confused. He said Human Resources had received a concerning call from my mother, claiming I was going through a crisis and might need some personal time off. She had framed it as if she was just a worried parent looking out for her son. My boss asked if everything was okay. I made it clear that my family had been harassing me and that under no circumstances should they be entertained. I went straight to Human Resources, explained the situation, and had my parents' numbers flagged. If they tried again, their calls would be ignored. Meanwhile, the ripple effect of their actions was spreading. Some of my cousins who had been neutral before started keeping their distance. A few stopped responding to my messages altogether, whether it was out of fear of getting caught in the family drama or because they believed my parents' version of events. I didn't know. Then I started hearing from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. They weren't reaching out to check on me. They were calling to convince me to make things right. My parents had been telling everyone that I was mentally unwell, that I was being influenced by the wrong people. They made it sound like I had lost control of myself, like I wasn't thinking clearly. Olivia got caught in the middle. At first, my parents had tried to use her as a bridge to reach me, but when she refused to push me into reconciling, they turned against her. Suddenly, she was being accused of taking my side, of letting me drag her down with me. She stopped visiting them as much, and the more she pushed back, the colder they became toward her. Then my mother made things public. She posted a long emotional message online about losing a son to selfishness. She didn't mention me by name, but it was obvious who she was talking about. She wrote about how parents sacrifice everything, only to be repaid with disrespect and abandonment. She talked about how children today have no loyalty, how they let outsiders poison their minds against their own family. Some of my relatives jumped in to support her. Others, though, stayed quiet. The comments weren't as overwhelmingly in her favor as she probably expected. A few even hinted that maybe there was more to the story than she was letting on. I blocked every relative fueling the drama, then heard something unexpected. My father's business had taken a hit. I didn't know all the details, but someone mentioned that his reputation had suffered because of how publicly he had handled the situation with me. Apparently, clients didn't take it well. When they saw him ranting about how ungrateful I was, some people had started distancing themselves. In the middle of all this, an unexpected message came through. An aunt on my mother's side reached out. Aunt Elaine. She didn't take sides openly, but she made it clear she supported me, told me she couldn't speak up because of the family pressure, but she wanted me to know she understood why I was doing what I was doing. Olivia finally made her decision. After weeks of watching our parents manipulate, lie, and use every trick possible to control me, she decided she had enough too. She didn't cut them off completely, but she stopped trying to fix things. She stopped defending them. She pulled away. Then their last attempt came, a letter. It was handwritten, a mix of guilt, regret, and one final plea. My mother wrote about how time was slipping away, about how one day I would wake up and realize I had made a terrible mistake. She said my father still wanted to work things out. She ended it by saying that once I was ready to be a part of the family again, they would welcome me back. Just as I was processing the letter, my workplace informed me that someone claiming to be my parent had attempted to contact HR under a new number. Despite having been previously blocked, they had tried to mask their identity, but it was clear who it was. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. By then, the extended family had split. Some thought I had done the right thing. Others believed I had destroyed the family dynamic. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't living under anyone else's expectations. I was finally free. The next phase of my parents' campaign against me started with my friends. Since they couldn't reach me directly, they decided to go after the people closest to me, one by one. My friends started receiving messages from my parents, some long emotional pleas, others more manipulative. They claimed I was unstable, that I had been acting irrationally, and that I needed an intervention before I made choices I would regret. My friends immediately shut it down. They sent me screenshots, blocked my parents, and refused to entertain the nonsense. Some even called my parents out directly, telling them to stop interfering in my life. The plan backfired. If anything, it only made my friends more supportive of me. Meanwhile, my extended family continued to fracture. Some of my cousins completely cut me off, siding with my parents without even hearing my side of the story. Others reached out privately, saying they supported me, but didn't want to openly take sides. I didn't blame them. The pressure from my parents was relentless, and not everyone wanted to deal with the fallout. Then my father tried to interfere with my job again. This time he called my workplace himself. He claimed I was mentally unstable and needed to be put on forced leave. He told them he was worried about my behavior and wanted them to step in before things got worse. Human resources didn't entertain it. After everything that had already happened, they knew my parents had been harassing me. They warned me that if my parents contacted them again, legal action would be taken. They also assured me my position was secure and that my father's words had no impact on my standing at work. But my parents weren't done. A few days later, one of my cousins reached out, claiming my mother's health had taken a turn for the worse. The stress from our falling out had supposedly caused her to develop serious health issues. My cousin insisted I needed to talk to her before it was too late. It was a lie. I reached out to a doctor relative, someone who had recently seen my mother, and asked if there was any truth to it. There wasn't. My mother was perfectly fine. They were just using the idea of a health scare to manipulate me. At the same time, Uncle Robert escalated things. He started spreading rumors that I was a bad hire and that my behavior had made me unreliable at work. He reached out to people in my industry, trying to damage my reputation. Then a sympathetic aunt sent me proof. Aunt Elaine forwarded me messages and voice recordings of my parents and Uncle Robert plotting against me. She advised me to take action before it got worse. I consulted a lawyer. A cease and desist letter was sent to my parents and Uncle Robert, warning them that if they continued their harassment and defamation, I would pursue legal consequences. Instead of stopping, they played the victim. My parents told relatives I was suing my own family, making it seem like I was the one destroying them over nothing. They twisted everything, making themselves look like heartbroken parents being attacked by their ungrateful child. But something unexpected happened. Instead of rallying behind them, some of the extended family began to distance themselves. The constant drama, the lies, the manipulation, it was exhausting even for people who had initially supported them. Then I made a decision. I started looking for jobs in another city. The harassment wasn't stopping, and I needed a fresh start somewhere my parents had no influence. It was time to truly break free. I moved without telling anyone. Once I secured a job in Chicago, I packed up quietly. No announcements, no social media updates, no dramatic farewell. I didn't want to give my parents, Uncle Robert, or anyone else in the family a chance to stop me. The only person who knew was Olivia, and even she didn't know the exact date until I was already settled in my new place. For the first time in my life, I was truly unreachable. It didn't take long for my parents to find out. Too late. Olivia let it slip during a conversation with them, mentioning that I had moved. That was all it took. Within hours, my inbox was flooded with emails from my parents. They demanded to know where I was, why I had run away, and how I could do this to them. Then they tried to track me down. My old landlord called me a few days later. My parents had shown up at my former apartment, pounding on the door, insisting they needed to see me. When they were told I no longer lived there, they refused to believe it at first. They demanded to know where I had gone, tried to pry information from the neighbors, and even waited around for hours. Eventually, they left, but not before making a scene. That was the final push I needed. I blocked them completely. My parents, Uncle Robert, every relative who had tried to manipulate me. Gone. No phone calls. No emails. No messages. The only family I kept contact with was Olivia, and Aunt Elaine, who had supported me, with no other way to reach me. My parents resorted to email spam, every day more messages. Some were filled with anger, accusing me of betraying the family. Others were drenched in guilt, pleading with me to reconsider. Then came the forgiveness trap. My mother sent a long email, pretending to forgive me, as if I had done something wrong. She wrote that all would be forgotten if I just came back home before it was too late. I ignored them all. Then I got a call from an old friend. He had heard from someone in my industry that my father was spreading lies, claiming I had abandoned the family and even stolen from them. He made it sound like I had run off with their money, leaving them struggling. It was absurd, considering I had rejected their financial support from the beginning. But my father didn't stop there. He actually tried to claim that I owed the money for the rejected house down payment. He even consulted a lawyer, though there was no legal basis for it. When I spoke with my own lawyer, they reassured me that since I had never agreed to the purchase, there was no case. My father must have realized this too, because nothing ever came of it. The case had no foundation. There was no agreement, no contract. Nothing. My own lawyer dismissed it as nonsense, and the matter went nowhere. That was the moment Olivia finally saw the truth. She had been holding on to hope that our parents would eventually come around, that things could be repaired. But watching them attack me so aggressively, fabricate lies, and even try to manipulate the legal system against me, she was done. She cut them off completely. My parents had lost both of their children. Then I heard from Aunt Elaine. She told me that my parents had alienated so many people that even extended family no longer engaged with them. Some were tired of the constant drama. Others had realized just how manipulative they had always been. The very people who once defended them were now avoiding them. The last thing I ever received from them was a letter, a dramatic final attempt at control. It was long, filled with everything I had already heard before. How I had broken the family, how they had given me everything, and I repaid them with betrayal. But the final sentence stood out. "If you do not apologize and come back to us, you are dead to us." I didn't even finish reading the letter. I tossed it in the trash without a second thought. That was the end. No more games. No more manipulation. No more guilt. I was free, and this time there was no way for them to pull me back in. A few months passed, and the silence remained. No messages. No unexpected visits. No attempts to drag me back into the chaos. My parents had finally stopped trying, but that didn't mean their lives remained the same. I heard from a former neighbor that my father's business was in serious decline. The same reputation he had tried to use against me had now turned against him. His constant outbursts, his manipulative behavior, and the way he had dragged our family drama into public spaces had made people wary of doing business with him. Some longtime clients had quietly cut ties. Employees who had stuck around for years started leaving for better opportunities. His influence had eroded, and for the first time, he was facing the consequences of his actions. My mother's social circle had also crumbled. At one point, she thrived on being seen as the perfect mother, the selfless martyr who sacrificed for her children. But after months of playing the victim, people started seeing through her. Friends who had once sympathized with her endless sob stories eventually grew tired of hearing the same complaints. Some cut ties altogether. Others just stopped answering her calls as frequently, without anyone left to validate her. She had no choice but to sit in the reality she had created. Then came the fallout for Uncle Robert, the same one who had tried to destroy my professional reputation. His attempts to spread rumors about me had backfired. When someone exposed his messages at his own workplace, his efforts to paint me as a bad hire had only revealed how petty and unprofessional he was. From what I heard, it had caused problems for him at work. Though I never bothered to find out more, he had tried to sabotage me and ended up sabotaging himself. Through all of this, Olivia and I rebuilt our relationship. Without our parents pressuring her to fix things, she was able to step back and see the situation for what it was. We started talking more, meeting up regularly, just being siblings again, without the weight of manipulation hanging over us. For the first time, our relationship was truly ours, not something dictated by what our parents wanted. Of course, my parents weren't done, making one last attempt to pull me back in. When they realized they could no longer reach me directly, they turned to extended relatives. asking them to convince me to speak to them. But by this point, even those relatives had grown tired of their games. No one wanted to be caught in the middle anymore. Their requests were ignored. Then they tried to get to Olivia instead. They showed up at her apartment unannounced, just like they had done to me months earlier. She refused to open the door. When they wouldn't leave, she called security. That was the last time they tried. A few weeks later, I received an email from them. It was long and dramatic, claiming they had changed and that they were ready to put everything behind them. They wanted to reconcile, to move forward as a family, but I had seen this pattern too many times. This wasn't about genuine change. It was another manipulation attempt. If I responded, it would start the cycle all over again. Then came the final guilt trip. Aunt Elaine messaged me, saying my parents were now claiming my mother was sick again, that she was suffering from stress-related health issues. But this time, my aunt wasn't calling to convince me to go back. She told me outright that it was another lie. My mother was fine. It was just another desperate attempt to pull me back in. And then finally, they stopped. No more messages, no more schemes, no more fake emergencies. It was as if they finally understood that nothing they did would change my decision. I was never coming back. Neither was Olivia. Without them in my life, I thrived. My career took off. I built friendships without the looming shadow of family expectations. I wasn't constantly waiting for the next manipulative demand. I was just living free. One day, I got a final update from Aunt Elaine. My parents were now completely isolated. The damage they had done, the bridges they had burned, none of it could be undone. Even the relatives who once defended them had backed away. They had lost everything, not because of me, but because of their own choices. The last thing they ever sent me was a letter. It was a final ultimatum, dripping with bitterness. If you do not apologize and come back, you are dead to us. I didn't even finish reading it. I tossed it in the trash without a second thought, knowing that I had already received the same message, just through different words. Many times before. A few months later, Olivia moved to Chicago too. We met up one evening, sitting on her apartment balcony, looking out at the skyline of a place where our parents had no power over us. We raised our glasses in a quiet toast to freedom, to peace, to never looking back.